Speaking of Pianists by Abram Chasins. Published by Alfred A. Knopf, New York, 1957. Narrated by Penny Johnson. Wilhelm Backhaus. It was a source of poignant pleasure to attend the triumphal return of Wilhelm Backhaus to the American scene in 1954 after a 28-year absence, to witness the excitement of an audience that jam-packed Carnegie Hall and welcomed Backhaus as a beloved master and public favorite. The occasion was especially significant to those who saw it in perspective, who brought memories along. When the blond, stocky young Nordic we remembered appeared before us as a venerable, slightly bent and white-haired man of 70, we were reminded sharply how many years had passed. When he began to play, and he had to begin with the wild applause still echoing around him, we were astounded and stirred to find his gigantic technical command unimpaired by time. But now it was guided by a gentler and more meditative spirit, molded by an authoritative maturity that comes only after a lifetime of devotion to art. When he had summed up the all-Beethoven program with a towering performance of Opus 111, thousands of thrilled men and women responded with a blazing ovation. My memory roved back to the early 20s, when Backhaus played year after year to row upon row of vacant seats in the modest spaces of Aeolian Hall. Essentially, in the incredible ease and naturalness of his pianism, in the unassuming simplicity and absorption of the man, Backhaus was much the same artist and personality then. And he was far from unknown. Even before he won the Rubinstein Prize in 1905, Backhaus was internationally celebrated as a prodigious virtuoso. How then can we reconcile an early public indifference and the electrifying acclaim that a substantially similar experience later produced within substantially the same generation? I was careful to say public indifference because Backhaus never failed to win a succès d'estime among professional musicians. They always knew his qualities, always marveled at his instrumental perfection, his titanic mastery that scorned every complexity, his unsurpassed freedom and endurance. There was never a time when Backhaus could not toss off any or all of the Chopin etudes or the Brahms Paganini variations with an imperturbable calm and implacable security that left one open-mouthed. Not everyone, for only the pianists really knew what was happening before their eyes and ears, knew how to measure such achievement. There they all sat, in breathless astonishment and envy and despair. But pianists do not fill concert halls and rarely buy their tickets. The paying public stayed away in droves. On stage, Backhaus was a shy, unaffected, recessive personality whose sensational capacities were so unsensationally projected that lay audiences remained totally unconscious of his fabulous accomplishments. Off stage, this pale, modest, silent man was an unlikely drawing-room lion, especially in the early 20s, when anti-German sentiment ran high. Backhaus's preoccupation was with music. His was the European tradition in which the music comes first, the artist afterward. The extent to which this is still true was illustrated by an incident told to me by my wife, the pianist Constance Keene. While touring in Germany, she heard a famous orchestra in a Mozart concerto with a piano soloist who could not possibly have survived the preliminaries of our major contests. The audience applauded madly. Puzzled, my wife later asked a member of the orchestra how such a musically educated public could respond so warmly to so dreadful a performance. "Oh," he answered, "they weren't applauding the soloist. They were applauding Mozart." Backhaus observed that in America, too, they were willing to applaud Mozart, as well as Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, and Chopin. But only, he ruefully noted in the old days, when these composers were played by Paderewski, Hofmann, Godowsky, Rachmaninoff, Levin, Gabrilowitsch, Bauer, Rosenthal, Levitsky, and still others who were less acclaimed, but today would loom as titans of the keyboard. These latter, Backhaus among them, were not numbered among the elite during the golden age of pianism. Not only was the competition overpowering, but Backhaus also learned that there was no middle ground. Whether it was a flagpole sitting or piano playing, a man was on top or nowhere at all. Backhaus left our shores a great pianist and an embittered man resolved not to return. Almost 30 years passed. Our people had become more and more musically experienced and cultivated. All of Backhaus's former rivals had vanished, their loss lamented by the older generation. Meanwhile, a new audience had arisen. It was buying recordings, and so discovered Backhaus to be the possessor of pianistic maturity and virtuosity not easily found today. At that moment, Herbert Barrett, a public relations counselor with no little taste and courage, expanded his activities to include concert management. What awaited him was anybody's guess, but one thing was certain: unless he could find a few stars to represent, he would be beaten before he started. He confided to me that he was thinking of bringing Backhaus back, and asked what I thought of the idea. I said that Backhaus was certainly a phenomenal pianist, that his recordings had made his name better known and more widely admired than ever before in our country, and that particularly in view of the dearth of pianists of comparable stature, his return struck me as an entirely happy and promising idea. Shortly thereafter, Barrett persuaded Backhaus that the American stage was set for a proper appreciation of his art, that the timing seemed perfect. The rest we know. But I must confess, despite my optimism, that I was totally unprepared for the magnitude of Backhaus's success. Of course, he played all the notes, and brilliantly, but he always had. There were no tricks, no follies, there never had been. Everything emerged with a consummate polish, from dainty delicacy to granitic power. When had it not? What Backhaus had acquired in the interim, and it was to be expected from such an artist, was a mellower spirit, a deeper understanding, brought to a more profound repertoire. That is a great deal, a very great deal. But essentially, Backhaus has been the same kind of pianist throughout his entire career. A meticulous craftsman, he is more expert than rapturous. When music demands dramatic utterance, melodic expressivity, and poetic ardor, his gaze does not reach from earth to heaven. Consequently, in precisely the most magical and moving moments of the serious music he plays, in the sonatas and concertos of Beethoven and Brahms, we miss the glow of the fine frenzy, and we always did. But among contemporary pianists, Backhaus emerged as a complete colossus, and it is another sign of the times that an artist who does not evoke romantic drama from a dramatic literature holds a supreme place among us. As an executant, Backhaus eminently deserves this place. As an inspired interpreter, as a visionary, he is victorious today by default. One aspect of his emotional appeal, however, is a positive one. Although Backhaus the musician may have lacked romantic fervor, Backhaus the man, who returned in his 70s to conquer, had a strong romantic appeal. Our imaginations are deeply stirred by those who remain undefeated by time. Our sympathies are aroused by injustice, our esteem by tenacity. An artist, and a truly distinguished one, who embodies the musical history of more than half a century, is bound to evoke romantic awe. Backhaus must know this, but the intellectual honesty that he has maintained throughout his time-honored career makes us know that he would be the last man to exploit it.